Phew, we finally made it to Resident Evil Outbreak, after some delay. Let's just jump right into it as there's quite a bit we need to cover. Outbreak is composed quite differently when compared to previous titles. There isn't really one long game you play through, and instead it's broken into scenarios. 5 of them to be exact. Jay's Bar, Below Freezing Point, The Hive, Hellfire, and Decisions. Along with that, no longer is there 1 or 2 central main characters. Instead, you get a character select screen with a ton of characters, but we're strictly focusing on the main core for now. That being Kevin, Mark, Jim, George, David, Alyssa, Yoko, and Sydney. So taking a page out of Resident Evil 1, each character has some unique stuff. For example, Kevin is an officer from the RPD, so he comes equipped with his own special handgun and can take a pot shot. But that requires you to hold down the aim button to pull off. He's also pretty fast, but not as tanky as someone like Mark. Mark can take quite the beating, and he also comes with a handgun, but his specialty lies in melee weapons. Jim has some smarts about him, as he can sometimes predict where items are, showing up as question marks on the map. Also has the ability to play dead, which can avoid enemies, but when you're on the ground, your infection meter goes up. So, more on that later. He also has a coin on him, and when flipping it, you have a chance to increase your critical hits. George is our chemical guy, allowing him to mix healing items with his kit for some stronger pills. Also comes with a dodge tackle, but it does need a couple of seconds to wind up. David is quite the repairman. He can fire a handgun with one hand and create some things with his tool belt, also a wrench.
If you can dodge a wrench, you can dodge a ball. What?
Alyssa is a pretty interesting one, as she has this picking tool, allowing her to unlock things instead of needing a key. Has a backward dodge and can do a lore ad-lib. That's pretty cool. Yoko is the lowest health member, but her upside is her magic backpack, allowing her to carry a lot more items. She can also dodge, but it's not as good as the next person. Sydney is the team medic, allowing her to carry extra healing items in her herb case. She also has an actual ducking ability, which can come in handy if used correctly. Now, like I said earlier, there are a ton of characters in this game, but they're more like skins. What I mean by that is these characters have their own name, but they're a type of the main core. Like this character Sean is a George type character. Okay, with most of the character basics out of the way, we can jump into the first scenario, Jay's Bar. With it being the first scenario, it also has the game's opening cutscene, where we open on a POV shot of none other than a rat. Here we get some small glimpses of some umbrella goons being cut down by a familiar face. And there's some nice splicing of scenes, going from that into cells. In case it wasn't too clear, Outbreak takes place as the outbreak occurs in Raccoon City. We watch as an unnamed soldier is swarmed by rats and get our title card. We'll get a little zoom out into the city and find ourselves in Jay's Bar. Every character here has their own little cutscene, but if I were to go over them all, we'd be here for a very long time. For the first scenario, I chose Mark. Mark is here with Bob, but he looks already...
Bob, where's your mind at?
We'll be interrupted by a very high-def zombie. Bob hits the floor and we get control of our character. So Jay's Bar plays quite differently than the other scenarios, as right away there's this kind of sense of urgency to just go. So we'll stack up these barrels and start looking for a key for the store. Aside from Yoko, every character has 4 item slots, and inventory is done in real time. So when we pick up this key over by the bar, if we're too slow, well, eventually zombies come crashing in. Rest in peace to the waiter guy. Getting through the store, you might be asking yourself, wait, did you just leave Bob? The answer would be yes. Remember boys, you don't need to be the fastest, just faster than the slowest person. Rest in peace, Bob. In the staff room under the newspaper, we'll find our next key for the door over here. Up these stairs, we'll enter into the liquor room, and the door immediately to our right will house our next key, and a typewriter. Saving an Outbreak isn't really a good idea, as you can only save and exit, meaning you can't save and continue. It works more like a pause button, if you will. Further down, we'll come across a forklift, and when we use the key, we can now push the lever up, giving us access to crawl across, and eventually leading us to the rooftops, with a handful of crows around. There's this old dingy gate we can shoot down, and when we do, we'll be interrupted by this cutscene.
Attention everyone. Due to the riots in progress, this area will be closed off soon. Please proceed to this checkpoint immediately. If you do not leave the area in time, we cannot guarantee your safety.
So now we're on a timer to get down and escape. All we have to do is jump across, but before you try to jump, make sure to shoot down the crows, or... Once we successfully make it across, it's just a quick elevator ride down and we'll be outside quickly. Making it to the officer, we get this banger of a line.
You startled me.
After seeing all hell has broken loose, we need to push these cars and form a barricade. Don't forget to pick up the shotgun from the trunk, as we're gonna need it soon. After we form the barricade, we have to run and deal with this scenario's main boss, a door. I'm quite serious, this door takes more shots than any of the zombies so far, though it will go down, just like the officer right after his dramatic turn. Now we need to set the fuel line off and pick up the officer's lighter. There's also an extra shotgun here if you need it. Releasing the fuel will drench the area in oil and we can do this cool trick. Neat. Well, we don't also want to be burned, so jumping into the canal it is. From this safe view, we get to see an explosion, then crawl our way into the tunnel and find a ladder to our first exit. Here we'll be at a safe little rendezvous and find our first bit of lore. Raccoon today just gives us a little insight on how the outbreak slowly started to happen, and adds some background for us seeing the RPD being corrupt, denying everything. When we're all settled, we can talk to this officer and get ready to evacuate. Getting into the back of the truck for one of the worst experiences so far.
We're taking side streets. Damn! Another barricade. As you can see, there are too many roadblocks.
We literally only drived an inch forward. Anyways, the back of the truck is opened, and here we can restock on items. Shotgun shells, shotguns, ammo, and first aid sprays. There's a few other survivors we can talk to, but they don't have much to say. When we progress a little further on the bridge, Mark will drop this gem of a line.
That's an order I never want to experience again.
We'll get a zoom out of a mass horde of zombies and 3 cops. I don't like those odds. Eventually getting overrun, leaving only the Riddler. This is our final part of the scenario. We come across the giant horde and it's up to us to put the detonator back together, picking up one part over here and the other by the dead cop, combining both pieces and thinning out the mob a little, making our way to the middle and using the detonator, clearing the mob and the scenario. Mark hits us with a one-liner.
I'm getting too old for this.
You know, this is a lot more people than I thought would be alive. We finally drive for more than a minute and Mark decides to monologue.
This was just a horrible situation from the start. But the battlefield is always there to deal with. And you must always fight to win. That was all I could think of at that time.
And then we see Raccoon City being quarantined off. Very, hopeful. The scenario then ends with the game's signature "to be continued." Like I said, Jay's bar is very different from the other levels, as you really don't get time to explore your surroundings, and there's 0 puzzles. But for a tutorial level, it's pretty solid. I really do enjoy when Resident Evil takes us to these public places. There's something interesting seeing these common places in a horror game setting. As with previous games, there's a results screen, determining your rank by time and events you completed. There's a lot of hidden value in replaying the game. Invisible items that give you unlocks, getting high ranks, you know, the usual for Resident Evil by now. Alright, it's time to head into what I say is the first true level of Outbreak, below freezing point. As with all scenarios, we start with a cutscene. Here we find this unnamed woman gushing over this thing. Okay. We then get control over our character, and this time we're playing as Yoko. We quickly jump back to the woman banging on the machine for whatever reason. You know, this area is kind of looking familiar. Once we reach the platform, we can find out the woman's name. Monica then snatches up our ID card, and we're left to have
a nice life. What's left of it?
Okay, so I know I mentioned there's no real main character, but sometimes scenarios kind of lean towards one of them. For example, this one has some cool things in store for us because we're playing as Yoko. Crawling into this vent, we'll wind up in a lab. And now it's more like traditional Resident Evil. Well, kind of. If you were to ask me how to describe Outbreak scenarios, I would describe them as Resident Evil themed escape rooms. Over in the corner is a computer with the memo we can read and get the passcode 0634. Outside in the duct, we can come across this giant plant blocking the ladder. When it comes to plants in Resident Evil games, there's really only one way to get rid of them. V-Jolt. Going into the chemical disposal room, we can pick up one of the chemicals we need. Our next chemical pickup is going to be over in the chemical storage, where we can input that code from the memo, pushing out the last chemical we need to make V-Jolt. Using it on the plant will cause it to, yeah, okay. We can't climb up further, so we're left to explore this floor for a solution. Over by this door, we'll come across a frozen wrench. It being frozen does no good, so we need to find a way to unfreeze it. Continuing down further, we'll come across the staff's break room, where there's a sink on with the water running hot, conveniently. Throwing the wrench in there will now make it usable. Now over in this corner, the camera gives us a little hint, drawing focus to the panel here, and when using the wrench, we'll open up to reveal our valve handle. We now have the means to connect the ladders, bringing us to the final part of the scenario. Catching up with Monica, we'll see a familiar place, but looking a little chilly. If you haven't quite noticed yet, but I'm sure you have, we're in the Resident Evil 2 labs. Unfortunately, there aren't that many places we can check out, but it's nice to see. Reaching the platform, we'll come across the lab keycard, and with that, we're essentially done with the level. Back in the east passageway, we can use our keycard, giving us access to another door. Now, this is where that part I mentioned earlier about playing as Yoko comes in, because if we're not playing as Yoko here, we would need a fingerprint from someone who works at Umbrella. Luckily, there is a way to add your fingerprint into the database just like in RE2, actually in the same exact room. It's a cool little callback. Continuing forward, we'll enter into the culture room where we can pick up a blowtorch. That blowtorch is used for thawing down this man's frozen hand, allowing us to turn the heater back on, which is going to unfreeze all the hunters we just passed. Time to make our way to the platform. With the turntables unfrozen, we can now board to escape in 3 minutes. A little bit before time runs out, Monica shows up with the briefcase open. When the time does run out, the platform takes off and Monica wakes up. Should have got the Pepto-Bismol while you're down here. Monica's chest gives birth to the Lima Bean monster from Jimmy Neutron and decides to follow us up.
That's what you're scared of? A stupid lima bean?
When we reach the top, the little guy transforms, grotesquely, into a kind of liquor. And here's our boss of the scenario. I was being serious earlier when I mentioned each scenario is topped off with a boss you have to face. After we drop the beast, we can take off, hearing another monologue.
How unreliable the memory is. I remember my acquaintance, but I cannot remember myself. Yet I feel something will change dramatically when I know everything.
And end of scenario. It's really nostalgic seeing an RE2 area in a HD setting, even if it's not fully explorable. I have some strong thoughts when it comes to this, but I'm still saving that for a later video. The second level being the labs feels a bit different, as usually labs are saved for the last part of most Resident Evil games, but for what it's worth, it's not so bad. Jumping into the next scenario, we'll arrive at Raccoon General Hospital, the same location as in RE3. Meeting this doctor.
Oh, I apologize if I surprised you. Please, do not be alarmed. I'm a doctor in this hospital.
And we're now free to explore this floor. We'll come across a nurse's diary making mention of it, and we're about to see just what that is. This is the nemesis of the run, kind of fitting with it being an RE3 location and all. The Leechman will follow us through the level using the vents in the hospital until we deal with him. In order to get rid of him, we need to get to the B2 floor, but that's going to be in a bit. Right now, we need to check on our doctor friend.
Oh, the bloody elevator isn't working. I'm trying to figure out why. See if this works.
Well, rest in peace. With the power back to the elevator, the hospital is now opened up. To access the B2 floor, we need a passcode, and that passcode is hidden behind a riddle. The solution is hidden in 2 memos: chemical code message and piece of memo. Piece of memo is located in the office, and chemical code message is located in the nurse station. With both of those memos, we can head down to the B1 floor, and into the elevator control room where we can punch that code in, after a small little math problem. Piece of memo will tell you the color chemical you need, plus whatever number, and chemical code message will show you the number for the color chemical. So carmine equaling red means it's 1210 plus 4105, giving us 5315. That'll call down the elevator, granting us access to the B2 floor. Here's where we'll deal with the Leechman. It's best to have a packet of blood on you to lure him in. However, I thought, it was an item you held in your hand and you gotta throw it. But no, you just place it. Don't make the same mistake I did. Okay, back with another packet of blood, we can head into the temperature room and place that blood pack on the floor. Luring the Leechman in and turning the temperature high, we'll be saying goodbye to leeches for a little. Now it's time to find a way out of here, which requires the keycard we're picking up from the doctor's body. We can use that keycard right outside and free an inventory slot up. There's still a bit left to do, but with no Leechman chasing us, it's just a matter of knowing what to do now. Heading down some stairs, making our way to the first floor, and into the examination room, we'll find another keycard. Before we head on out, back in the elevator control room, we can punch in another code, 0930. That'll give us access to the rooftop, and when playing as Sydney or Kevin, we can get a submachine gun from this dying officer. Nice. We need to use the keycard down on the B1 floor and basically head into the sewers. Here, lying next to a dead body, is a padlock key. That key is our ticket out of here. All we need to do now is use the elevator one last time to the B2 floor, where we use the doctor's keycard. Inside the room is a boat we can unchain with our padlock key. Hopping on, and we're ready to escape. Except there's a fleshy wall of leeches that we crash into. waking up the giant leech. This boss fight is pretty simple if you saved up the ammo you found around the hospital. If you're a little low, you can shoot down these valves overhead to do some significant damage, but I found the angle to hit them weird. Making light work of the leech, we'll get Kevin's monologue as we walk through
Now I wonder if the normal world ever even existed. Things are that strange. If I keep walking, can I awake from this dream?
It's pretty much cheating, but hospital settings are used commonly throughout horror games because they're a pretty good backdrop, and that's still true here. I think it's a pretty strong scenario, despite the boss of this area being a little lackluster. Our next scenario brings us to the Apple Inn. The cutscene begins with our survivors running down zombie-infested alleyways in a cool POV shot. Stumbling across the inn via the back way, we'll cut to some firefighters. Hence the scenario title, Hellfire. Looking around, we'll hear a familiar sound, and see an even more familiar shot. Going into the room that just exploded, we'll find the body of a firefighter and a voice on the radio that'll tell us to get to the front of the lobby. But as a quick side note, the way Kevin responds to this is absolutely hilarious.
Hey you, huh? What? No shit.
So, just get to the front of the lobby. Should be simple enough. Just gotta go through the fire escape and scale the building. I'm sure nothing bad can happen. Safely making it across this time, we can take the ladder down and finally begin the level. Right away, there's a locked door that needs a keycard, and further down we can come into a room that has a memo we can read, saying that the staff wasn't that big of a fan of the keycard system. Also, negligence. Seems this guy has a habit of leaving his keycard wherever, but we'll find the keycard in the boiler room, alongside the body. Before we go in and lock that door, we can go into the owner's room and push this box down. We can find a registry here that looks kind of important. Anyways, back to the keycard door. Inside the security room is a memo that explains how to use the escape ladder. In the back of the room is a weird looking statue and bookcase. We'll stumble around the hotel until we come across a certain room with some light up pictures. Now, this is a puzzle, but it already got solved by Yoko. It has to do with lighting picture frames up around the rooms. Another nice small detail is memos. You know me, I do love some lore. And scattered around is basically people's last days here before the outbreak happened. So once you have all the pictures lighted up, this drawer over here unlocks, giving you the gold key, which Yoko is holding on to for us. Thank you, Yoko. Now we need to backtrack back through the hotel and into the owner's room again. Hopping on down and into this passageway to room 101. In room 101 is a safe that we can unlock by comparing the registry with who's staying in here. So just punch in BAE and we get ourselves the silver key. Silver and gold in hand, we have all the necessary keys to get our final key. Keys, man. Keys on Van Nuys. Taking our gold key from Yoko, we can get access to the power supply room. To get the power back on, we just need to solve this puzzle. One of those ones that light up an area, but if you click over here and light some of them, you know the deal. After trying a few combinations, I eventually got it, putting our emergency power back on. We do have one more use for that silver key though. Going through some various rooms and crawling between some, we'll wind up at the locked door. Going inside room 306 and all the way to the back is a red jewel, our final item to escape. All we need to do now is head back to the security room. Remember that statue? Well, we just need to insert the jewel. Look, if you've played Outbreak before, you might already be calling me an idiot, because I thought I was doing something wrong. I mean, I even checked out a guide to make sure I didn't miss anything, but to be fair to me, I play these games late, and sometimes, you know, I'm sleepy. How was I supposed to know you're supposed to move the bookcase first? After we turn our brains on and do the correct order, we'll have access to the front lobby. There's a handful of healing and ammo around here, so it's easy to stock up. Lowering the ladder and going down it. There's a switch we can push that'll ring off the alarm. When we try to leave through the undamaged front door, we'll be stopped by... Rule 34, liquor. The real name is called Suspended, but I think mine makes way more sense. This boss fight can be a little tricky if you're not ready for it. She hangs from the ceiling as two lickers run around in the background, has some pretty decent range and a grab. If you maintain your distance and heal accordingly, she'll go down quickly. We'll be saved, but technically have to run there. Outside, we'll get some more incredible dialogue.
That was close. You were lucky.
Some more monologuing, well, more like a sentence.
At this time, I was still optimistic about my chances. Thinking about how lucky I'd been. But maybe that was just my brain's way of keeping it together. How pathetic.
Yet again, that feels like way too many people alive for being an Outbreak. I don't know, maybe I just want anarchy or something. Hellfire is a pretty solid scenario. It can be quite long if it's your first time. The whole hotel feels kind of maze-like, especially with the way fires are blocking your path. And if you like a cheeked up liquor for whatever reason, this scenario is probably your favorite, weirdo. Atmosphere-wise, I think this is the second best, with the final scenario being the best. Speaking of, Decisions is quite the final scenario. We open on an unnamed scientist and a makeshift tyrant. Jumping back, we'll get a glimpse of George receiving a letter in an alleyway. Our survivors make their way through, and we end up at probably the coolest location so far, Raccoon University. Okay, seriously this time, this scenario is way more like your classic RE game. I mean, just look around, this is giving heavy RE1 mansion vibes. With this being the final scenario, it also means we're in for a long one. Heading over to the elevator room, we can find a computer, but we need a passcode for it. We can pick up the map over here, which will be quite useful. Over inside the Students Affair office, we'll get our first bit of lore, Peter's diary. It goes over his creation of a reagent named Daylight. Basically the solution to the T-virus problem, but Greg seems a little suspicious, so Peter hid the compound instructions. There's a bookcase over here with a book mentioning a moose with a shining red eye and blue eye, kind of like Jules. Further in the back is the manager room, where we can lift the painting up and push a switch, letting us now move the clock hands. But we don't have the solution for it just yet, unless we read the memo on the desk. The number memo is one of my favorite puzzles in this game. At first glance, it just looks like a bunch of numbers and ends with hour 90 and minute 81. Not quite sure on that part, but if you look at the numbers carefully, they'll make a number. Here's some little MS Paint so you can see it more clearly. The numbers made out are going to be 0325, and when put on a clock would be 325. Popping out are red jewel. Now, if only there was a moose. Have no fear, because by the Brace of Canada, over in the back is actually a moose head. This is our first goal of this section, collecting the red and blue jewel to be able to use the elevator. Well, the red jewel is pretty simple, so the blue one can't be that far behind, right? Kinda. Continuing forward on our exploration of the university, we'll eventually come across part of Torn Memo that contains just 3 numbers, 927. Also some open wiring, not a safety hazard at all. This door right here is a quick shortcut out to the main hall, but it's a one-way door. With that, the first floor is basically explored. All that's left is the second floor. Passing by some nicely decorated hallways, we'll head into the drawing room. Inside here, we'll find some glasses and an antivirus. Antivirus pills are solid to take whenever you find them, as a small one will stop your virus meter for about 3 minutes. Those glasses we just picked up can be put on the statue over here, opening up a secret passage. The door in the back of the drawing room leads to the president room, and in the fireplace are these cords we can pull. I pulled the red cord, dropping us a nice little zombie surprise. Checking over in the room across from us, we'll see a statue with her arm lowered, giving us our blue jewel. See, I told you it wasn't that bad. If you were playing as Sydney, you could bypass all that I did and just play the piano.
Did you find it? Did you find anything?
Going through the secret passage, we won't find much here, but it does loop us around back to a familiar hallway. With the blue eye now resting inside the moose head, the door behind us will open, bringing us down to the study room, and to the corpse of who I assume to be Peter. On Peter's desk are a bunch of notes. One note in particular is how to create daylight. All we need is the base, poison, and blood. The base is being kept in the basement, poison is being kept in the lab, and for the blood sample, well, that was Greg's job. Another memo is here talking about changing the elevator code, and just a single number. 4. So with the knowledge to make daylight and the elevator code, we can set off to do just that. And this is where the scenario can branch off. When taking the elevator, we can go to 2 floors primarily, B4 or B2. Taking B4 will bring us to the exhaust tower, while B2 is the easier route down in the water treatment facility, so you know where we're going. Arriving on the B2 floor, we'll come across George. Rest in peace. Jumping down into the sewers, we'll do some running around until we find the management office. Here we'll find a machine that we can use to create our P-base, but we don't have the materials just yet, so we'll put a hold on that for now. Running back through the other end, we'll reach the water purifying facility where we'll find our next key, also hunter gammas. The key with the red tag can be used in the management office over in the back, unlocking the water tank room. In here, we just need to use the computer to unlock the door on the other side. Then jump back into the purifying room, cross some bars, go through a yellow door, another door, and eventually we'll end up on the other side in the water tank room. And up in this room, we'll find our sealed reagent case. Now we can finally cook up some P-base. Nice. That's one of the 3 things we need to make a cure. Making our way up, we'll get a glimpse of some umbrella goons, a Speedo, and Nikolai? Anyways, we see just how we're going to get our T-blood sample. The Nantos makes a leap, and we're outside. We're going to unlock the front door and then take a little stroll down by the pier.
Look, I'm Woody. Howdy, howdy, howdy.
just a quicker route to get to the elevator. Take that all the way up to the B4 floor, and down a hallway where we can meet up with Yoko, who's holding on to some V poison for us. With 2 out of 3, we can use the elevator once more to go over to the 3rd floor. There's a station here where we can make daylight, but we still need our blood sample. You know what that means. As soon as you enter back into the main hall, the Nantos jump straight in. The Nantos is going to pursue us, and this is where that safety hazard comes in handy. If you just wait right here as he hits the corner, you'll be able to drop him. If he comes. When he comes. What the Once you shock him, he'll be down for a moment, and that's when we can pick up that blood sample. With our final ingredient, we can head back to the 3rd floor and make some daylight.
Everyone listen up. The serum will be ready shortly. Move yourselves over to the lab.
When everyone arrives, the power dies out, but we can make our way to the back room, where we'll find the scientist from the opening who starts sounding a lot like my ex.
It must also be beautiful, unique, and godlike.
Nikolai does us a solid, and that's actually a lot more hardcore than I thought was going to be shown. Anyways, we're at my favorite part, the countdown. We need to turn the power back on using the computer, then we just wait for some daylight to be created. Every so many seconds a new one will be made, meaning we just gotta sit here for a minute. Because it's good to have multiple, especially if you want the good ending. With an endless supply of daylight, we can head back over to the computer room to release the locks, and sneak out this door. Now, it's all about getting outside, so hopefully you have this area memorized. After you get outside, all we have to do is wait. We get to see the building blow up, the Tyrant gets crushed, and lucky us, some firefighters see the explosion nearby. We have to meet up with them a few blocks down, and come across all this loot for no apparent reason. Trying to open this door, we'll be greeted by, of course, a now mutated Tyrant. With all this ammo, he's not particularly hard to beat, and if you want style points, there's even a rocket launcher somewhere around here. Immediately after dropping him, the game moves on to the next part, and credits start to play. Until... You know, I did enjoy the little fake out, but this fight here is actually a cakewalk if you have daylight. Because tucked over in the corner is a special gun that when loaded with daylight will one-shot the Tyrant, bringing us to our final cutscene and view over Raccoon City, watching as the missiles hit and Raccoon City is no more. Mark gives us our final monologue.
The sun is rising. The nightmare which will likely cover the earth is gone in a flash. Yes, the worst enemy is neither zombie nor virus. It's man's total lack of conscience or remorse.
And credits. There is one more little after credit scene of Umbrella still being up to no good. For the final scenario, I think it starts pretty strong, introducing us to the university, collecting the jewels, getting used to navigating this giant place, but when we reach the middle, it feels a little uninteresting to a degree. The university is such a cool setting to play with, and we toss it away to go into some sewers. Luckily, I think by the end of the scenario, it picks back up, ending with a pretty decent Tyrant fight if you decide not to go for the one-hit kill, but that's Resident Evil Outbreak. File 1. They did make a sequel called File 2, but before we get there, I have one question for you. Do any of you remember Blockbuster?
Wouldn't it be great if you could get everybody's Christmas gift at the same place? Maybe you can. I'll let you in on a little secret. The Holiday Gift Center at Blockbuster. After all, everybody has a favorite movie. And who has more favorites than Blockbuster? Besides having more movies to rent, they also have more movies to give. Oh, plus they have all kinds of video games for the kids. So take care of everybody on your list. Make it a Blockbuster holiday.
So, in case you don't know, Blockbuster was a little chain store where you can rent games from, or Small Soldiers 1,000 times. Anyways, me being a young kid and having Timmy as a brother, I always had to look out for games that were multiplayer. Taking a look at the back cover of Outbreak and being unable to read full words, I saw 2 to 4 players, and the cover had a gun, and thought, well, this is gonna be sweet. Well, about that. See, Resident Evil Outbreak was multiplayer, but only if you had internet and a network adapter. But what was the internet?
Online 4.0, the easiest just got easier.
It's easy to install and easy to get started.
Everyone I know is on it. Email, instant messages. There's no better way to keep in touch.
You've got mail.
They made the internet easier than ever.
Free 24-hour customer service.
We've spent over $1 billion to create the world's largest high-speed network. Now with 56K, connections are faster than ever.
It's fast.
If you have a phone line, you can go online.
What will they think of next?
America Online, so easy to use, no wonder it's #1.
If you have a phone line, you can go online. Phone line.
Sony released an online adapter with the whole idea being online gaming, but reading through the wiki page should tell you already it was quite the headache. You had to put the online setup disk in your PS2 so you can set your network settings up, and then they would be saved to your memory card. At the time, there also was no PlayStation Network, as opposed to Xbox, who had Xbox Live. Sony just relied on third parties for their servers. Tying this back to Outbreak, I actually never got to play Outbreak how it was originally intended. And in 2007, they shut the American servers down for good. In Japan, however, they kept the light on until 2011. Outbreak got its first legs as a multiplayer minigame that sounded a lot like a horde mode and was put on hold, until eventually coming back in 2002.
Level design for a totally new gameplay experience.
And also, I'd like to share with you a very special video that we've received from Capcom. And certainly Resident Evil was one of the platform-defining titles for the original PlayStation. And now, with Resident Evil Online, they are going to take this very massive franchise into the next millennium.
Outbreak looked a lot different and even had a different name. But funnily enough, some of these scenarios in the trailer would make it to the final game, just not in Final 1. And some of them we just wouldn't see. Around late 2002, they boasted about having 18 scenarios in development, but by May 2003, they cut the number down to 5, showing off a new trailer at that year's E3, and before you knew it, it had released. So the whole point I'm making here is, well, the title of this video should be Resident Evil Outbreak is Special, unless I change it for some reason. Yet so far, personally, I would say it's pretty average. It feels like Resident Evil Light. There really isn't an overarching story you can be invested in. Inventory management isn't really a thing here. The monsters don't require you to be well prepared or equipped, at least on lower difficulties. Puzzles are a cakewalk, and it feels depressingly lonely. I played through the whole first game solo, mostly because I wanted to see and show the comparison. Because you don't play Outbreak to play it solo. At that point, you're better off playing any of the other previous titles. Capcom was even so nice to have created a whole ad-lib system, as they didn't want players to communicate with mics, due to the chance of some negativity. There's so many lines in this game. Easter eggs, costumes, there's a whole lot of heart here. Going forward in this video, I might not be able to recap everything, or at the very least show off everything, as all the footage from this point on is going to be from my streams I did over on Twitch, starring, well, you. Let's just rip the band-aid off right away, as yeah, the ad-lib system is pretty fun, but depending on your copy, they might have nerfed it. However, overall, I feel File 2 is vastly superior to File 1. It feels mechanically better, scenarios feel a lot tighter, as you'll soon see. They added a lot of quality of life adjustments. First of all, you can move and shoot. That's just crazy. And they reintroduced Jay's bar, but this time as a true tutorial. And it honestly does a solid job of giving you the basics. Now you can pick up items if you were downed, you have more control of your AI partners if you're playing solo. It just feels better than File 1. A lot of people, myself included, feel as if File 1 and File 2 should be counted as one game. But it's more like twins. Both have their separate identity, but when looked at together, feel as if it's a whole piece. I hope that makes sense. Also, it would be an extreme shame to talk about Resident Evil Outbreak and playing it online, and not talk about the amazing work done by the people over at Outbreak Server Resurrection, bringing back a server in 2014 and allowing us to play this game how it should be played. I should mention here, before we fully jump into File 2, about how the Outbreak meter works. So, you don't die like a typical RE game, instead you'll be dropped to the floor after so many hits, which will increase your virus meter, and when it hits 100, you turn into a zombie. Special thanks to my buddy Trauma for helping me get the footage you're seeing here. Hit him with a follow over on Twitch, he's a good guy. Okay, so with that, let's look at File 2. Unlike File 1, File 2's opening cutscene isn't tied to a scenario, it starts before you even press start. Here, instead of a CG cutscene, our locations we'll be traveling to. And they are really selling it, because we do in fact return to the RPD. They even changed the starting screen. Well, a little bit, it just starts differently, but eventually we'll end up on the eye. They did however update the voice guy. Our first scenario of File 2 is rightly titled, Wild Things. Here we get to see more of the rundown city and a lot of zombified animals, which first of all is just really cool, and for the first time I'm pretty sure, seeing zombies eating animals. Don't think we've seen that before. But then we get the money shot. This scenario takes place at the zoo, which is just a wild setting, no pun intended. To start the scenario off, we need to find a way to open up the gate, and to that there are two ways. Over in the cafe, we can read this note, which will give us the code for the lock, or you see that bright blue item? You could use that. We're civil, so we use the passcode. As soon as you take a single step forward, you'll be hit by a cutscene. Did you think we would be able to walk around the zoo with no pressure? Of course not. Mainly, there's these long roads that connect to smaller locations, but for the time being, the elephant will chase you down on these more open locations. Who, by the way, is named Titan. You'll know when Titan is around because he's accompanied by a music cue. And you don't want to stay around too long unless you like seeing the moon. And it's not just Titan that we need to be on the lookout for. Scattered around the zoo are various animals. Poochienas, Toucan Sam, bees, alligators, and Nala from Lion King. Most of the doors around are locked and etched with the corresponding animal: elephant, alligator, and a lion. Leaving just the office is our first place to visit. Here we'll be saying goodbye to this guy and hello to our first key, the elephant key, giving us a pretty straightforward path as there aren't many places to explore aside from this area. Continuing forward, we'll come across a big plant area and eventually a swamp. And this is the cool benefits of multiplayer. See, my buddy over here isn't the strongest of swimmers, and well, you gotta swim across the swamp. So instead we're gonna meet up on the other side, and I think that's kinda cool, where one person can complete one part while the other waits or does another part. Up inside the greenhouse are a few key items: a medal and our alligator key. The key just unlocks a shortcut, but our medal is going to give us our last key. However, this area houses something even more important, which is kinda cheeky. As with a lot of scenarios, there's no power, and for the most part, Outbreak kinda blocks you out of doing certain stuff early. Because in the office is a computer that can turn the power back on, and you need a code. But you can't just access it and input a code. No, you actually need to read a memo to then be able to input the code, and that memo is right here. So if you don't pick this up, you might be stuck wandering around the zoo despite everything else being done. Don't forget it. With the power back on, we can head into the back office and insert 2 of those Mr. Raccoon tokens into the statue. Bring in some lights on and you should know what to do. Push this and then stand here, where behind the painting is our lion key. The lion key brings us to our final area where we do a little last minute checklist. Use this crane to reveal a hiding red shield where our buddy is nice enough to pick it up. Then on stage we'll find some rifle ammo for the rifle over in the green room, pick up this blank tape, push the car out of the way for a shortcut here, and head back to the elephant stage. This is another cool thing that just can't happen solo. See, my buddy went to the side over here while I lure Titan into the middle, closing him in and dropping that body, which will drop the blue lion shield. Now I have to wrap all the way around, but they can just go and pick it up. I know it's nothing crazy, but I don't know, I just find it satisfying. While my buddy goes over to the final area, I'm going to pick up the stash of guns I have over here, grabbing a shotgun, a rifle with 2 bullets, and some handgun rounds, linking back up and finally creating an exit out. Just like File 1, we do have a boss fight, but unlike File 1, here we have a Pokemon situation, where we choose our version or who we want to face. If we didn't lock up Titan, we would be fighting him here. Instead, we get to face Stalker, a male zombified lion who comes rushing into the scene. This boss can hit pretty hard, is decently fast, but the developers were also nice enough to leave plenty of healing around. The rifle puts in work here, and soon after, we'll eventually drop Stalker, bringing us to our ending scene on a subway, which is fitting as the next scenario takes place in a subway station. The monologue here is kind of weird. Kevin talks as if there isn't an outbreak happening. I mean, just listen.
It wasn't a bad part of town, really. Even a good-for-nothing son of a bitch like me might be able to get a few jollies there.
Right off the bat, I feel like you can tell the developers started to find their groove. The scenario just feels better, giving you some optional choices, a lot of cool environments to check out, but like Hellfire, it is easy to get lost around this map. Not knowing where to go exactly, and not knowing where this memo is, can be a bit of a pain. The backtracking is fairly light, the puzzles in this scenario aren't anything complicated or very interactive, but personally I give it a lot of points just for being in a zoo setting. You just don't see that location in a horror game often, you know? Our next location, however, is more of a traditional horror space. Starting off our scenario, just like Hellfire, we get a POV shot of running through the city, with a nice close-up of a zombie before entering into the subway. One tidbit when playing multiplayer is sometimes you guys don't all start in the same location. As for this scenario, there were 3 of us, but only 2 of us on this side, with the other starting somewhere else. The subway station isn't in the best condition, but it traded that for atmosphere. Empty, trash, with bits of the ceiling caved in at places, electricity going crazy, and some weird looking webs in the back. Like all the scenarios, we're looking for a way to escape, and there's really only one way to do that, by using the subway. And like I mentioned earlier, look, at this point if you're in a horror game or movie, the power is just not on, okay? The doors of the subway car are open though, and inside are a lot of goodies, which can vary. Most times it's an assault rifle, other times a shotgun. However, always will be our key, which gives us access to the employee area. Outbreak for the most part is pretty straightforward in design, at least on lower difficulties. It's hard to get lost early on since the path is painted clearly. All the doors around are locked and there's only one accessible place, the subway cart. Find a key in said place, and then that opens another area where all the doors are also locked and only one area of interest. Searching until you find another key and starting to see the picture. The area of interest now is the break room, which houses lockers, and one notable locker has the name Jim. Well, two I guess, because the one that's not Jim's is locked here and needs a passcode. The passcode is, you guessed it, written on a memo somewhere. You'll find that memo in the men's bathroom, and the password is always different. The ladies were nice enough to deal with a mob of zombies while I punched the code in, getting the B2 key. The lower area is more open, but it's kind of deceiving, because the few doors that are open are just extra areas full of fluff. The main reason we're down here is to put the power on and fix the water problem, because as you can see, it's kind of flooded. And we need the water on for the sprinklers, you know, in case a fire started somewhere and there was an important item under the fire. Easily enough, we can find a valve over in the power room that lets us turn the water off, which you want to do before you turn the power on because, you know, electricity. Now that the water is off, we need to find a way to fix that pipe. With electricity running through the subway station again, we can head over to the breaker room. Well, we would need to if we were solo, but as soon as I turn the power on, our pal Alyssa does the power puzzle for us, allowing us to meet up in the storage room. We really don't miss anything doing that puzzle. It was just a simple move numbers over until everything adds up to 10. Inside the storage room, we'll find one of our last key items. Tape. That'll tape up the pipe and allow us to get water on for the sprinklers. To escape this place, we'll need to disengage our subway car that's locked in place by a gate. In typical Resident Evil fashion, we need 2 plates. One gold and one blue, like this memo mentions. I'll be your gentle reminder, but if you don't read that memo, then your character will have no idea what to do with the plates. As you try to interact with the gate, we'll be introduced to a new enemy that'll be replacing all the zombies. Please. These are gross looking little guys who, when they jump on you, suck out your blood and then turn into big gross guys. After some time, we'll hear this notification. And a new train is hitting the station. That train brings us our last plate. How are we supposed to escape without it? I don't know, but good thing it came. Our pal Alyssa will head inside the train while we head over to that web place we saw earlier, because she's about to be snatched up by the Mother Flea, aka our final boss. This boss fight is pretty fun. The start of the fight has some fleas doing their best Sonic the Hedgehog impression as 2 smaller fleas stay in the area. The Mother Flea, as I call her, doesn't really do too much. She's a swipe, but it's mostly those 2 smaller ones you gotta keep an eye on. If you take out the 2 smaller ones, eventually 2 more will rejoin when they bounce through. There's plenty of ammo littered around and health, so there's really no worry. Taking down the boss doesn't jump you straight into the ending cutscene. We actually have to get to the subway car. Getting there, we'll get our cutscene and find out a terrible truth.
It's as if the darkness was laughing at us.
They replaced Mark's voice actor. Underbelly doesn't have the whole boss variant thing as the previous scenario. Instead, we can actually get a whole different ending. To get to that alternate ending, we have to miss our train, dropping us a key which lets us unlock the door over back where we turn the power back on. Our escape will be through the ventilation tunnel, climbing a lot of ladders, and on our exit we'll reach a street. That'll tie into a scenario down the line, because the next scenario requires a green thumb. Flashback is an interesting scenario, bringing us to the middle of a forest in a cabin, with a very unsuspecting old man.
Let's hope no one gets hurt. It's not like there's a decent hospital around here after all.
This scenario also heavily favors Alyssa, or how Kevin likes to call her,
Elisa!
or anyone else for that matter, so maybe I'm wrong. Anyways, we follow this old man into the Forbidden Woods and find ourselves outside of a hospital. Thought you said there wasn't one nearby, The reason this scenario is Alyssa favored is because throughout the level you'll come across Alyssa's flashbacks, dropping some more backstory about the hospital as we venture through. So this is another thing about multiplayer that some players might not enjoy. Because the footage you're seeing here, I kind of take a back seat with my buddy here taking the lead, speed running through the level as I waited for them to open this side of the area up. They were so fast in fact, they practically beat the level by the time I made it to the exit area. MVP. But what kind of YouTube guy would I be if I didn't go over any of the scenarios, so back to the entrance we go. Stepping into the hospital is going to trigger Axeman to appear, who definitely isn't that old guy from earlier, no way. He follows us around from time to time like a mini pudgy nemesis. That's twice now that both hospital scenarios feature a nemesis-like stalker. The hospital is fun to explore, all these rooms ransacked and the building barely looking like it's standing, overtaken by nature, but it isn't. It's overtaken, well, by plants, but infected plants. We'll pick up a couple of syringes to hold on to, with our first use being down some stairs, drying the plants up, at least for the section. The whole goal of this area is to dry up a few of these plants, which will then awaken the boss. Also, after some time passes, the bridge breaks. Why is that important? I don't know. Our next stop as a makeshift doctor brings us to the rooftops, where we encounter Axeman again, this time as a little pudgy mini-boss. After he runs away, we'll get access to the top of the building, where we can drive the main big plant, and also get a glimpse of things to come. Finding our way to the exact area lets us drop down into it, and gives us access to the other side of the hospital, mainly to find the storage room, because this is where our exit is. Something doesn't want us to leave quite yet, as vines will grow over the door, blocking us from our escape. So instead, it's time to find one more patient. Well, two. When we use our last syringe, the boss will show itself on the bottom floor, making our way to her, and this boss is a really big joke. There isn't much danger except falling debris, but aside from that, you can get straight into her face and blast her. As you take down the Bulbasaur, all the vines will dry up, and a body slides right out. So now we'll jump back over with our friends and find our way to the storage room, taking down the Axeman in the process, escaping as we watch the building collapse from afar. A couple of notes here. One, it seems like the old man who, yes, is Axeman, I know, shocker. Anyways, it seems as if he's been luring people here to feed these people to the plants. Mainly because his wife is the plant, or at least is consumed by it, or it grew from her. When you take down Axeman in the final moments of the scenario, you'll get an extra cutscene of him finally reuniting with his wife, which then abruptly gets cut into one of the funniest scenes. Like, look how fast it gets smushed, it's comical. This isn't all the scenario has to offer, there is an alternate ending to get here, but it's a little tedious, as you have to wait for the bridge to collapse before even attempting it. Once it collapses, this woman will magically appear in the blink of an eye, talking about how her daughter has gone missing and gives us the task to find her, but she'll only come with us if we show her this amulet. Well, I went looking, took a wrong turn, went down a bridge, and ended the scenario, so... Okay, this scenario is just straight up cheating. It's also one of the most interesting for me and one of the most boring in this sense. I've mentioned this multiple times, and Outbreak for the most part is pretty linear, and Desperate Times is no exception. Bringing us back to the RPD, which we haven't seen since RE3, but even that was limited. Here, you can't fully explore every location the RPD has to offer, but there's a lot to sightsee, and it's just so... beautiful. I mean, it's obvious RE2 is very much a fan favorite, but putting yourself in the shoes at that time, with the remake being out and seeing the RPD in a more modern setting, you couldn't help but think about the possibilities. You could even argue this felt like a tease, like maybe there was a remake of 2 coming out, right? Alright, enough with the gushing. Desperate Times really relies heavily on fanfare because everything else is kind of... You're tasked with going around collecting 5 plates, which is going to take you around the RPD and even the holding cells, letting you take in all these locations, from the rooftop to the not just yet bloody hallways to even an old friend, who we saw do the same exact thing in Hellfire, but hey, it's still cool. The collectathon isn't anything special to do, as most of these items are kind of just out there, with the exception being the one kept in the vault in Marvin's room, who, hey, Mr. Marvin, nice seeing you. There is one annoyance or hindrance to collecting the plates. After a set amount of time, some rooms will have gas leaking, which greatly increases your meter, so it can kind of cause you to pause for a minute or two. But just because the main goal is pretty straightforward doesn't mean there isn't hidden items, because for this scenario, there are a lot. There's places to reuse the unicorn medal to get items, there's even special film rolls hidden around who you can give to Ben to get more items, and when playing as Kevin, there's even more items to grab specifically for him. It's kind of crazy. When you get all 5 plates, you open up the statue, and this lady decides to crawl through to help us escape. She'll be back later. If you notice though, there are a lot of healing items around, even more outside. That's because when she returns, we see the developers did include a bit of a nod to that horde mode after all. Also, Marvin got bit. The final part of the scenario doesn't include a big boss. Instead, it's wave after wave of zombies, until you reach a certain number, and the crawler will show back up with, "Hey, it's you!" We'll escape, leaving Marvin behind to keep things in place canonically. We even see a cop car drive by as a nod to Leon and Claire, but we know that can't be them as they don't arrive to the RPD until a day after, and Jill will get there first anyways. I got a whole segment on that later. I know, just how long can this video get? Well, not too much longer, because we're arriving at our final scenario.
Let me go! No!
There's no better way to start a scenario off than this.
So long as you realize, if it's my ass or yours, you could bet my ass will be the first out the door, baby.
We quickly fly over some labs, and to David. You okay there, buddy?
Wait a second, she's human!
Naturally, with things not going our way, the alarm starts to ring. Ah yes, back in some familiar territory. Last scenario, some labs, feels just like home. Even some dead bodies hanging around and some blood splattered onto the keypad. This is our first and really only puzzle of the scenario. With everything on lockdown or requiring a level 1 ID card, we'll need to search until we come across the examination room key. Where inside the exam room we'll find Linda. Oh yeah, this is Linda and that's Carter. Linda wants us to go find Carter, but to do that we have to open up a few doors with that bloody key code. I got the number 647 and the passcode could be any combination of the three, so 746, 467, 476, but for me it was 647. There's some lasers we need to disable to go further, and I like this style of backtracking, as once we make it past the lasers, we can't really proceed forward just yet, but we do find our level 1 card, and that lets us just run all the way back, opening up all these doors. It's simple, but effective. We'll come across Carter in the observation room, and he starts talking about some things that just don't seem like a good idea. But us having no idea what a tyrant is, gladly run over and get him his MO disc. Awakening tyrant, and Carter seems to think this thing can be controlled.
I've reprogrammed it to take out those amphibian monstrosities instead.
He isn't completely stupid, as he seems to have built a failsafe, but I'm more with Linda on this one.
Yeah, let's just get out of here, okay?
You know, I gotta say, it feels kind of relieving to have the big bad on our side. Walking into rooms with him and feeling a sense of protection as he fights the hunters. And Mark. No way that's gonna end anytime soon. We need to make a pit stop though, and find a crowbar so we can open this broken panel up, creating a little hole we can crawl through. Continuing forward, we'll see that Tyrant being on our side was short-lived. Go figure.
There is nothing to...
Double kill.
Now, of course he's gonna run us down, but before we get punched, we're gonna pick up Carter's ID card. Also, every time Tyrant attacks you, he makes this funny-ass growl sound. There's only one use of the second level ID card, and it's to open up the passageway to the sewers. Once inside, we'll find out Linda is still alive, or looks alive, and this tyrant isn't going away anytime soon. We'll get some iframes as we push this box into this big yellow circle, creating a hole we can jump into. Now that we're down a level, we need to find our way to Linda. They try to throw us for a loop as we head into this underground cave, especially since it feels like this whole part down here is loaded, and going through doors doesn't take you to a black screen. So a better way to go forward than to jump down another hole, where we'll find Linda. We then find out the capsule she had was basically a cure to the virus. And then we get flushed away, waking up in a location we've been at before. If it doesn't look too familiar, maybe this angle will help. If that doesn't, it's basically the location we swam into after we blew the tanker up in the very first scenario. Finding our way surface level, we'll see Linda has some terrible luck. We're closing in on the final moments of the scenario, and there's a lot going on here. We can save Linda here, bringing her to the end, or leave her here. Continuing forward, we'll have to dodge a few sniper shots and mines. We'll cut away to a chopper and see it's about time we get out of here.
Time to get my butt out of here.
And welcome to Decision 2. You know, the final scenario title should have been swapped, honestly. I'll show you both ways you can go, with the first one being pretty simple. Run to the helicopter, ignore the mutated tyrant, and fly away. I told you, it's really simple. Don't worry though, because both endings are basically the same. So we'll go over that in a minute. For now, let's jump back to a few minutes ago. We're gonna wait out the time and get a different cutscene. Seeing the chopper be shot at, dropping down the cage. What's in the cage? I honestly don't know. It's like some thing that absorbs life forms, creating this big massive bodies. It's unsettling and gross. Well, that's our final boss, and to get to our final boss, we have to go up a lot of stairs. A lot of stairs. Reaching the rooftop, we can make a jump, and find ourselves in the final boss arena. Linda isn't the only unlucky one, as Tyrant gets snatched up, getting absorbed. And I kinda feel bad for the little guy. He's just stuck there, wiggling his little claw. Our final boss may look giant, and the cutscenes may have you feeling like it's this crazy thing that's hard to avoid, but it's pretty simple. It has a couple of different attacks, like hurling giant puddles of flesh at you or slamming its hammer of an arm down. You can also be absorbed, and I don't know if it's just by being hit or being hit with low health, but you can wiggle alongside Tyrant. You want to hit this flesh blob until it drops to its makeshift knees, then it will open up its heart, which is its weak spot. With the final shot, the massive flesh will dissolve into the streets, leaving us free to escape. Well, some of us. We then get to see the military's perspective as they shoot off missiles to Raccoon City, with this really cool shot. Then David says this.
So the shit hit the fan and the fan finally busted. That's how Raccoon City came to pass. Come on, let's face it. Life, even if you aren't surrounded by zombie freaks, there's still plenty of other dangers waiting for you. So, whatever new crisis comes my way, it's just more of the same shit on a different day.
How depressed can you be? Now, I just showed you one ending, and technically the worst one because we didn't save the only person who could stop the virus. But that's not what I'm here for. There's just way too many endings to go over and cover. For example, playing online, depending on who else is around you, you can get different endings. This is in reference to File 1's final scenario. There's endings for pairs like Kevin and Jim, Mark and David, etc, etc. And there we have it, every scenario in Resident Evil Outbreak File 1 and 2. Before I finally end this video, I just wanted to go over a few things I couldn't really fit in earlier, such as difficulty. I brought up how linear Outbreak is over and over, however, that's not entirely fair. Yes, on easy and normal, the game is pretty forward in progression, but Outbreak features 2 other difficulty levels that'll make the most veteran RE fans sweat a little. You have hard and very hard, which not only increases damage dealt and enemy AI, it also switches up the key item locations, kind of giving you a fresh start. Think of it as New Game Plus, and it's what most Outbreak fans seem to enjoy. You have fewer resources, really making you have to get good. Okay, this isn't something I usually talk about because let's be honest, Resident Evil canon is kind of all over the place. Just as an example, in RE1, depending on who you play as, the good ending will have you save your partner character. So Barry or Rebecca, and then saving Chris or Jill. And your ending cutscene will be with all 3 of you, but we know all 4 of them survived, so it just feels a little weird. Then you tie in the whole Rebecca went and solo killed a tyrant in 0, yet can barely deal with a hunter in 1, and things just get messy. So to simplify things, is Outbreak canon? Well, yes, and no. Look, the Outbreak characters are for sure canon, as they'll be mentioned in memos and future titles, but as far as the scenarios go, it's a bit of a toss-up. The very first scenario I would say is definitely canon. What happens after is up to interpretation. Maybe some survivors went this way, some went the other way, who really knows? So that leaves 2 last questions, with one of them being, does Resident Evil Outbreak need a remake? I'm gonna be honest with you and say no. You don't need to remake Jay's Bar, Underbelly, or any of these scenarios. You can just release a new game and call it File 3 or New File or something else, because Outbreak as a game isn't the same as a Resident Evil 1 or 3, where you're tied to those characters' actions, backstories, locations, and even the crazy plot. In Outbreak, the only thing you really need to keep is the characters. I mean, you can just choose any locations you want and call it Outbreak. Want a scenario to take place in the forest? Boom, done. Want another scenario to take place in a subway, even though Raccoon City was a small place? Also done. As long as you're keeping the spirit of Outbreak, there doesn't need to be a remake per se, just a new game. Hell, an HD update to the game would be enough for a lot of fans, as a lot of people don't want to go through the trouble of emulation. Now, to finally end things off, is Outbreak truly special? Your mileage may vary depending on what you want out of a Resident Evil title. I know a lot of fans hate when Capcom steers the ship into a co-op oriented direction, but I think the fact that they try to make a co-op game in a traditional Resident Evil way is very impressive. At the same time, there are a few things that hold it back because of that. Namely, loading times can be awful, and if you're playing only using the Atlas system and not using something like a Discord, it can be kinda hard to keep track of where everyone is. I mean, there's a program people use that keeps track of players in game. That should tell you enough. The boss fights are very lackluster, and sometimes scenarios can kind of feel a bit dull. But at the same time, it's literally old school Resident Evil, but multiplayer. There's really nothing else like it. The camera angles, certain locations, and it's hard not to find a scenario you like. For me, it'll be the final 2 ones, which are very long and you can't save, so if you die, it can be annoying to start all over again, but there's just something special there. Anyways, if you made it this long listening to me for however long this video ends up being, I appreciate you. Thanks for hanging out with me for this one. I want to give a special shout out to those that helped me along the way here. Shy Girl, Too Hard to Think, Traumified, and you. The OG Resident Evil games have finally come to an end, and I think it's fitting to cap the year off with them. Next time it'll be a new style and a new set of rules, and I hope you join me for that one too. Sound off in the comments though on your experience with Outbreak. Did you hate it at first? Maybe still do? Is it your favorite in the franchise? I'm excited to hear all your opinions. And as always, take it easy.
What are you buying?
Imagine my surprise to find you still here. Well, welcome to the bonus part of the video. Here, I just want to congratulate my audience for being smarter than I. Because a lot of you got the question right I asked in the Dead End video. Also, because all of you are subscribed, right? I don't know why, but when I picked that item up, I thought it was Magnum rounds. But I guess not.